The deep space reconnaissance vessel Void Whisper drifted through the black emptiness between star systems, its hull gleaming under the distant light of a dying red giant. Captain Kethfer stood on the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he watched the tactical display with practiced eyes. The Zephyrian Empire had sent his ship to scout the edges of unexplored space, looking for new worlds to colonize or resources to exploit. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced Navigator Quindel from his station. Unknown vessel, approximately 12 kilometers out. Kethfer turned his reptilian head toward the main screen. A ship hung motionless in the void, its dark hull barely visible against the star field. It appeared crude compared to Zephyrian technology, with thick metal plating and what looked like primitive thruster arrays. The design seemed functional, but lacking the elegant curves and advanced materials of their own vessels. "Analysis," Kethfer ordered, his voice carrying the authority of decades in command. Science Officer Zelthor bent over his console, tentacles dancing across the controls. "The vessel appears to be of unknown origin, Captain. Hull composition suggests iron-based alloys with ceramic plating. Length approximately 800 meters. I detect no active power signatures, but there are faint energy readings from what might be a reactor core. Could be a derelict. Suggested communications. Officer Morkath, perhaps abandoned after a system failure." Kethfer studied the strange ship. In his 40 years of service, he had encountered dozens of alien species and their technologies. Most were either far more advanced than the Zephyrians or significantly behind them. This vessel fell into neither category, seemed deliberately simple, as if its builders had chosen function over form. "Conduct a full tactical scan," he ordered. "I want to know everything about that ship before we proceed." Zelthor nodded and began configuring the scanning array, initiating deep scan protocol. This may take several minutes to complete a full analysis. The scanning beam lanced out from the Void Whisper, invisible to the naked eye, but capable of penetrating most known materials. It would map the internal structure of the unknown vessel, catalog its technology, and provide detailed information about its construction and capabilities. Inside the human battleship UHS Defiant, alarms began. Blaring throughout the corridors, the sound echoed off the metal walls as crew members rushed to their stations. "Captain to the bridge," announced the ship's communication system. Captain Jake Morrison stepped out of his ready room, still fastening his uniform jacket. His weathered face showed the lines of a man who had spent years in the void, fighting pirates and raiders along the outer colonies. At 52, he had seen more combat than most officers twice his age. "Report," he barked as he took his command chair. Chief Engineer Lisa Parker looked up from her console, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail.
"We're being scanned, sir. Deep penetration scan, more advanced than anything in our
database." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, turned from his station. "I've got the scanning vessel on sensors. It's unknown configuration, about 6 kilometers to our starboard. They started scanning us 3 minutes ago." Morrison frowned. The Defiant had been conducting a routine patrol along the edge of human space, when their stealth systems had gone offline for scheduled maintenance. Without their electronic camouflage, they were completely visible to anyone with decent sensors. "How detailed is this scan?" Morrison asked. Parker's fingers flew over her controls. "Sir, they're not just looking at our hull. The scan is mapping our internal systems, weapons arrays, power distribution networks. They're getting a complete blueprint of our ship." "Can we block it?" "It's not without the stealth system online, and that's going to be down for another 6 hours." Morrison considered their options. The Defiant was a Hercules-class battleship, designed for extended operations in hostile territory. Her weapons could reduce a small moon to rubble, and her armor could withstand direct hits from most known weapons. But they were alone deep in unexplored space, facing an unknown alien species with technology that seemed more advanced than their own. "Atlas, are you getting any data on that ship?" Morrison asked, addressing the ship's artificial intelligence. "Affirmative, Captain," replied the AI's calm voice. "I am conducting passive scans to avoid provoking a hostile response." The vessel appears to use exotic materials in its construction. Their scanning technology is approximately 40% more advanced than our current systems. Communications Officer Amy Chen looked up from her station. Sir, should I attempt to establish contact? Not yet. See what they want first. Aboard the Void Whisper, Zelthor was beginning to receive the first data packets from the scan. What he saw made him lean closer to his console in surprise. Captain, these readings are unusual. The vessel's internal structure is far more complex than its external appearance suggests. Explain. The ship appears to be divided into multiple compartments with redundant systems throughout. I'm detecting what appear to be weapons bays, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. Kethfer moved to stand behind the science officer. What kind of weapons? Not certain, sir. The power requirements suggest something far beyond simple energy weapons, and there are multiple types. I count at least 7 different weapon systems, all integrated into a single platform. The captain's scaled brow furrowed. Most ships in the galaxy were designed for specific purposes. Science vessels for exploration, cargo haulers for trade, warships for defense. This unknown vessel seemed to combine elements of all three, but with a heavy emphasis on combat capability. Continue the scan. I want a complete analysis. Yes, sir. As the minutes passed, more data flowed into the Void Whisper's computers. The unknown ship revealed layer after layer of complexity. Its armor was thicker than most battleships, its weapons more numerous than a typical destroyer, its power systems more robust than vessels twice its size. Ryan Hayes watched his tactical display as the alien ship continued its scan. Captain, they've been at this for 15 minutes now. It's a very thorough examination. Morrison nodded grimly. They're being very careful. Either they're scientists who've never seen anything like us, or they're military and they're trying to figure out if we're a threat? Which do you think it is, sir? Morrison studied the alien vessel on the main screen. Its design suggested a species that had mastered space travel long ago, with technology that made human engineering look primitive by comparison. But there was something about the way they were conducting their scan that suggested military training. Military, he said finally, and they're being very, very careful. Zelthor stared at his console in growing disbelief. The data streaming in from the deep scan defied everything he knew about spacecraft design. His tentacles trembled as he processed the information, cross-referencing it with the Zephyrian Empire's vast database of known technologies. Captain, he called out, his voice tight with concern. You need to see this. Kethfer approached the science station, noting the unusual tension in his officer's posture. In 20 years of service together, he had never seen Zelthor look. Frightened by scan data? What have you found? Sir, this vessel is not what it appears to be. The weapons systems alone... Zelthor paused, manipulating the holographic display to show a cross-section of the human ship. They have 17 separate weapon systems integrated into a single whole. 17. Kethfer's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of surprise in his species. That seems excessive for a vessel of this size. That's not the concerning part, sir. Look at the power requirements. Zelthor highlighted several sections of the ship. These appear to be kinetic accelerators, but the energy draw suggests they can propel projectiles at relativistic speeds. A single shot from one of these weapons could punch through a moon. The captain studied the display more carefully. The human ship's design was unlike anything he had encountered. Where Zephyrian vessels used elegant energy weapons that disabled rather than destroyed, these humans had built weapons designed for complete annihilation. And here, Zelthor continued, pointing to another section. Plasma cannons that operate at temperatures exceeding the core of most stars. The cooling systems required to prevent the ship from melting itself are more complex than our entire propulsion system. Perhaps their defensive weapons, suggested Navigator Quindell from his station. Designed to protect against large predators or space hazards. Zelthor shook his head. Sir, I've analyzed the firing arcs and targeting systems. These weapons are designed to engage multiple targets simultaneously across a wide area. This is not defensive technology. This is a ship built to wage war against entire fleets. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Morrison watched the alien vessel with growing unease. Yes, the scan had been running for 30 minutes now, far longer than any normal survey would require. Lisa, what's taking them so long? He asked. Chief Engineer Parker looked up from her console, wiping sweat from her forehead. Sir, they're not just scanning us. They're analyzing everything. Our weapons, our armor, our life support systems, even our waste recycling. They're being incredibly thorough. Are they learning anything we don't want them to know? Everything, sir. With the stealth system down, we're completely exposed. They're getting detailed specifications on every system aboard this ship. Lieutenant Commander Hayes turned from his tactical station. Captain, should we power up weapons? Maybe that will. Encourage them to back off. Morrison considered this. The Defiance weapons were designed to fight at ranges exceeding 50,000 kilometers. If these aliens had hostile intentions, powering up weapons might be seen as an act of aggression. But if they were simply curious, it might make them realize they were dealing with a military vessel. Negative. Hold position and maintain passive. Scans only. But be ready to bring all systems online on my command. Dr. Sarah Collins, the ship's medical officer, looked up from her station where she had been monitoring the alien vessel's crew. Captain, I'm reading some unusual biometric data from the alien ship. Explain. Their stress hormones are spiking. Heart rates are elevated. Whatever they're finding in their scan, it's making them very nervous. Back on the Void Whisper, Zelthor continued his analysis with mounting horror. The deeper he dug into the scan data, the more disturbing the picture became. Captain, I've identified the missile systems. They carry warheads with yields measured in megatons. But that's not the worst part. He manipulated the display again. The missiles themselves are intelligent. They have their own targeting systems, jamming equipment, and evasion protocols. These aren't just weapons. They're autonomous killing machines. How many? Kethver asked quietly. Count 48 launch tubes, sir. Each tube can fire multiple missiles in rapid succession. A single salvo from this ship could sterilize the surface of an inhabited world. The bridge fell silent. The implications were staggering. Zephyrian Empire's most powerful warships carried weapons designed to disable enemy vessels, allowing for capture and interrogation. The concept of weapons designed solely for destruction was alien to their way of thinking. Perhaps they're an old warrior species that has since evolved beyond violence, suggested Communications Officer Morcath. Hopefully, their technology might be a relic from a more primitive time. Zelthor checked his readings again. Oh, sir. These systems are new. Energy signatures show regular maintenance and upgrades. Someone has been continuously improving these weapons. He pulled up another section of the scan. And look at this. The ship's medical bay is designed to treat massive trauma injuries. They have surgical equipment for removing projectile fragments, burn treatment facilities that suggest they expect to fight in extreme conditions, and enough medical supplies to treat hundreds of wounded. They expect to take casualties, Kethver said grimly. Not just expect, sir. They plan for it. The entire ship is designed around the assumption that it will be damaged in combat. Multiple redundant systems, emergency power supplies, backup, life support. This ship can continue fighting even after taking damage that would cripple most vessels. Amy Chen aboard the Defiant noticed increased communication traffic from the alien ship. Captain, they're transmitting a lot of data. It looks like they're sharing their scan results with someone. Can you intercept it? I'm trying, sir, but their encryption is beyond our current capabilities. However, I am picking up what sound like emotional indicators in their communications. They seem agitated. Morrison frowned. Atlas, analysis of the alien communications.
Captain.
Based on vocal stress patterns and transmission frequency. I estimate the alien crew is experiencing significant psychological distress. Their communications have shifted from routine scientific exchanges to what appears to be urgent tactical discussions. They're scared, Morrison realized. That appears to be the most likely interpretation, sir. Dr. Collins looked up from her. Medical sensors. Sir, their stress levels are continuing to climb. Whatever they're finding in their scan, it's having a profound psychological impact on their crew. On the Void Whisper, Zelthar made his final and most disturbing discovery. Captain, I found their computer core, and the data storage capacity is enormous, but I've managed to identify some of the file structures. What kind of data? Tactical databases, sir. Combat recordings, weapons testing results, and what appear to be strategic plans for large-scale military operations. This ship carries the accumulated knowledge of an entire military civilization. Kethver felt a chill run through his scaled body. A military civilization? Yes, sir. Based on the data volume and organization, these beings don't just use military technology. They live it, breathe it, study it continuously. This isn't just a warship, Captain. It's a library of warfare. The science officer's voice dropped to a whisper. Sir, I think we've encountered a species that has turned war into a science. The captain stared at the human vessel on the main screen.
Seeing it now.
Not as a primitive ship, but as a carefully engineered instrument of destruction. Every line of its hull, every system within its frame, had been designed by a species that understood violence in ways the Zephyrians had never imagined. How long until the scan is complete? He asked. Another 10 minutes, sir? Complete it quickly. I think we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. But even as he spoke, Kethver was beginning to suspect that some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Zelthor's tentacles moved frantically across his console as he accessed the human ship's historical database. What he had found in the weapons analysis was disturbing enough, but he needed to understand the context. Why would any species build such devastating weapons? The answer, he hoped, lay in their historical records. Captain, I've breached their data storage system, he announced, his voice strained. I'm accessing what appears to be their historical archives. Kethver moved closer to the science station. What do their records show? I'm translating now, sir. Their language is complex, but the patterns are becoming clear. Zelthor paused as new data flowed across his screen. Sir, according to these records, these humans have been at war for their entire recorded history. That's impossible. A species could survive constant warfare. Not constant, sir, but nearly so. In the past century alone, they've fought dozens of major conflicts, and that's just the recent data. The deeper I go into their archives, the more conflicts I find. The science officer brought up a holographic timeline filled with red markers indicating periods of conflict. The display showed an unbroken chain of wars stretching back thousands of years. Look at this, Captain. They fought wars over territory, resources, ideology, and sometimes for reasons that seem to make no sense at all. They've battled each other with primitive weapons, then advanced weapons, then weapons that could destroy entire cities. Navigator Quindel studied the display from his position. Perhaps these are isolated incidents. Disputes between different factions of their species. Zelthor shook his head grimly. No, sir. These are organized conflicts involving millions of their people. And here's the disturbing part. They don't just fight until one side wins. They fight until one side is completely destroyed or surrenders unconditionally. He pulled up specific battle records, translating them in real time. This engagement. Here they call it the Battle of Stalingrad. Human forces fought for over 5 months in the ruins of a destroyed city. Casualties exceeded 2 million beings. They fought building by building, room by room, until one side was eliminated. Kethver felt his scales shift color again. In Zephyrian culture, conflicts were resolved through negotiation or limited combat with minimal casualties. The idea of deliberately fighting to the death was incomprehensible. Surely these are ancient records, he said hopefully. Perhaps they've evolved beyond such savagery. No, sir. These records are recent, as well as the weapons technology has only made the conflicts more devastating. Zelthor highlighted another section of data. This conflict they call World War II. They used weapons that could level entire cities with a single explosion. The casualties numbered in the tens of millions. Aboard the Defiant, Dr. Collins continued monitoring the alien crew's vital signs. Captain, their stress levels are off the charts. Whatever they're finding in our database, it's having a severe psychological impact. Captain Morrison studied the alien vessel through the main view screen. How much of our history could they be accessing? Chief Engineer Parker checked her systems. Sir, they've breached our main database. They have access to everything: military records, historical archives, tactical manuals. They're getting a complete picture of human civilization, including our wars. All of them, sir. Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his tactical station. Captain, should we cut the connection? We could overload the data links and force them out of our systems. Morrison considered this. On one hand, the aliens were learning things about humanity that might make them view humans as a threat. On the other hand, cutting them off might be seen as a hostile act. Not yet. Let's see where this leads.
Communications Officer Chen turned from her station. Sir, I'm monitoring their transmissions. The emotional stress indicators are increasing. They're not just scared, they're horrified. Back on the void.
Whisper Zelthor continued his deep dive into human history. Each new discovery made the situation worse. Captain, I've found their military training records. They don't just fight wars, they study them. Analyze every battle, every strategy, every weapon. They've turned warfare into an academic discipline. Brought up examples of human military academies and war colleges. They have entire institutions dedicated to teaching the art of war. Their officers spend years studying historical battles, learning from past conflicts to become more effective killers. This is madness, whispered Communications Officer Morcath. What kind of species dedicates so much effort to perfecting violence? Zelthor found records of human war games and military simulations. They practice warfare constantly, even when they're not fighting real battles. They create elaborate scenarios to test their strategies and weapons. They've simulated conflicts involving entire star systems. The most disturbing discovery came when he accessed records of human philosophy about warfare. Captain, they have an entire branch of philosophy dedicated to the study of war. They've spent centuries analyzing the nature of conflict, developing theories about strategy and tactics. Show me, Kethver ordered. Zelthor translated several key passages from human military philosophers. This one says that war is the ultimate test of a civilization's will to survive. This one argues that a nation that cannot defend itself doesn't deserve to exist. And this one. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. This one states that the best way to ensure peace is to be so prepared for war that no enemy would dare attack. The bridge of the void whisper fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just stumbled into becoming warriors, they had consciously chosen to perfect the art of warfare. There's more, sir, Zelthor continued reluctantly. I've found records of their weapons development programs. They don't just build weapons, they continuously improve them. Each generation of weapons is more powerful than the last. He showed them records of human weapons testing, including footage of nuclear explosions and antimatter detonations. They test their weapons not just to ensure they work, but to maximize their destructive potential. They study the effects of their weapons on different materials, different atmospheric conditions, different types of targets. Different types of targets? Kethra asked. Yes, sir. They've developed specialized weapons for fighting in space, on planetary surfaces, underwater, and in various atmospheric conditions. They've even developed weapons specifically designed to fight other species with different physiologies. The science officer accessed another section of the database. Here are their contingency plans. They've developed strategies for fighting enemies they've never encountered, using weapons they haven't built yet, in situations they've never faced. They plan for wars that don't exist, plan for wars that might exist. Sir, they've created detailed scenarios for every possible type of conflict, from small skirmishes to galaxy-spanning wars. They've even developed plans for fighting enemies with technology superior to their own. Navigator Quindel studied the human ship with new eyes. So this vessel, it's not just a warship, sir. It's the product of thousands of years of military evolution. Every system, every weapon, every piece of technology has been refined through actual combat experience. This ship represents the accumulated knowledge of a species that has never known true peace. Captain Morrison noticed that the alien scanning had become more intense. Lisa, What are they focusing on now? Our historical databases, sir? There. Pulling massive amounts of data about human conflicts, military strategy, weapons development. They're learning everything about how humans fight wars. Are they accessing current military intelligence? Some of it, sir. They're seeing our tactical manuals, strategy guides, and training materials. They're getting a complete education in human warfare. Dr. Collins looked up from her medical monitors. Captain, I'm reading what appear to be psychological trauma. Indicators from the alien crew. Whatever they're learning about us, it's breaking their minds. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known that humans had a violent history, but he had never considered how that history might appear to a peaceful alien species. From their perspective, humanity might look like a race of monsters. Atlas, analysis of the alien crews. Psychological state, Captain. Based on their biometric readings and communication patterns, the alien crew appears to be experiencing severe psychological distress. They are exhibiting symptoms consistent with acute fear response and possible trauma. They're afraid of us? That appears to be the most accurate assessment, sir. They are afraid of what they have learned about human civilization. Morrison stared at the alien ship, realizing for the first time how humanity's long history of warfare might appear to outsiders. To them, humans weren't just another species. They were the galaxy's apex predators. Captain Kethra's hand shook as he demanded a full briefing from his science officer. The partial reports had been disturbing enough, but he needed to understand the complete scope of what they had discovered. The bridge crew gathered around the central display, their faces showing the strain of the past hour. "Give me everything," Kethra ordered. "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Zelthor manipulated the holographic display, bringing up a comprehensive analysis of human military doctrine. "Sir, the humans don't just fight wars. They've created an entire philosophy around acceptable losses and strategic sacrifice." Explain. Their military leaders are trained to calculate the cost of victory in terms of their own forces. Deliberately sacrifice thousands of their own people to achieve a tactical advantage. Zelthor's voice trembled as he translated the data. They call it acceptable losses. They have mathematical formulas for determining how many of their own soldiers they're willing to lose to accomplish a mission. Navigator Quindel stepped back from the display in horror. They sacrifice their own kind. Not just soldiers, sir. I found records of conflicts where they evacuated their civilian populations, then destroyed entire cities to deny them to the enemy. They have a doctrine called scorched earth. They'll destroy their own resources rather than let an enemy capture them. The science officer brought up tactical simulations from human war colleges. Look at these training scenarios. They practice situations where victory requires the complete destruction of their own forces. They have strategies that assume total annihilation of the attacking force. Kethfer studied the simulations with growing dread. In one scenario, human commanders ordered their own ships to ram enemy vessels when their weapons failed. In another, they detonated their own ammunition stores to prevent capture, killing everyone aboard. They're willing to die rather than surrender. Surrender isn't even considered in most of their tactical doctrines. They have something they call fight to the last man protocols. When facing overwhelming odds, they continue fighting until every last member of their force is dead. Communications Officer Morcath accessed another section of the database. "Captain, I've found their prisoner of war records. Even when they are captured, they continue to resist. They have detailed plans for escaping from captivity, sabotaging, enemy operations, and gathering intelligence while imprisoned." Zelfar highlighted another disturbing aspect of human warfare. They've weaponized their own death, sir. They have soldiers who carry explosive devices and deliberately detonate them in close proximity to enemy forces. They call them suicide bombers. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The concept of deliberately killing oneself to harm the enemy was beyond the understanding of the Zephyrian mind. "There's more," Zelthor continued. "They've developed weapons specifically designed to cause maximum psychological damage to the enemy. Chemical weapons that cause horrible suffering. Biological weapons that spread disease and radiation weapons that contaminate areas for generations. They poison their own worlds. If it gives them a tactical advantage, yes, they've contaminated vast areas of their homeworld with radioactive materials, some of which will remain dangerous for thousands of years. They consider it an acceptable cost of warfare. Aboard the Defiant, the crew was beginning to understand the effect their history was having on the aliens. Chief Engineer Parker monitored the data transfer rates and noticed patterns in what the SEE aliens were accessing. "Captain, they're focusing heavily on our most violent conflicts," she reported. "They've spent significant time reviewing World War II, the Martian Rebellion, and the Outer Colony Wars. They're not just reading about our weapons, they're studying our tactics and strategies." Captain Morrison felt a growing sense of unease. "What kind of tactics are they finding?" "Everything, sir. Blitzkrieg operations, siege warfare, guerrilla tactics, orbital bombardment strategies. They're getting a complete education in human military doctrine." Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his console. "Sir, they've accessed our current strategic plans. They're seeing our contingency protocols for defending Earth, our fleet deployment strategies, and our rules of engagement." Dr. Collins continued monitoring the alien crew's biometrics. "Captain, I'm reading severe psychological distress from their entire crew. Heart rates are elevated, stress hormones are through the roof, and their communication patterns suggest they're in a state of panic. Are they planning to attack us?" "Sir." "If anything, they seem to be preparing to flee. Their weapons systems remain powered down, and they're beginning to charge their propulsion systems." Back on the Void Whisper, Zelthor made his most disturbing discovery yet. "Captain, I've accessed their military psychology profiles. They've studied the mental conditioning required to create effective soldiers." "What do you mean?" "They've developed techniques to suppress their natural inhibitions against killing. They train their soldiers to overcome psychological barriers that would prevent them from harming other sentient beings." The science officer displayed human military training programs. They use psychological conditioning, realistic combat simulations, and gradual exposure to violence to create soldiers who can kill without hesitation. They've turned the creation of killers into a science. Kethfer stared at the data in horror. "They deliberately corrupt their own minds. They call it military discipline, sir. They've identified the psychological factors that make beings reluctant to kill, and they've developed methods to overcome those factors. They can take a peaceful civilian and transform them into an efficient killer in a matter of months. And they do this voluntarily? Many of them, yes. They have something called military service, where their young adults voluntarily undergo this conditioning. They consider it an honor to serve in their military forces." Navigator Quindell accessed personnel records from the human ship. "Captain, I've identified the crew composition of the vessel we're scanning. It's staffed by individuals who have undergone this military conditioning. Every single person aboard that ship has been trained to kill." The implications were staggering. The humans they were facing weren't just members of a warrior species. They were professionally trained killers who had volunteered for military service. "How many crew members are aboard their vessel?" Kethfer asked. 237, sir. All of them military personnel with combat experience." Zelthor found the service records of the human crew. "Captain, many of these individuals have participated in actual combat operations. They're not just trained killers, they're experienced. Killers who have already proven their effectiveness in battle. Look at their captain's record," Morcath added. "Jake Morrison, age 52. He's participated in 17 major combat operations, has commanded 4 different warships, and has been decorated for valor in combat multiple times." The science officer translated Morrison's military record. He's fought pirates, raiders, and enemy military forces. He's been in situations where his ship was outnumbered 10-1, and he still achieved victory. This being has made a career out of winning impossible battles. Kethfer felt a chill run through his body. They weren't just facing a human warship, they were facing a vessel commanded by one of humanity's most experienced combat veterans, crewed by professional soldiers who had chosen war as their way of life. "Sir," Zelthor said quietly, "I've found something else. This ship isn't even considered a frontline vessel by human standards. According to their classification system, it's a patrol ship designed for routine operations." "A patrol ship?" "Yes, sir. If this is what they consider Standard equipment for routine patrols. I can't imagine what their actual warships look like. The bridge crew exchanged horrified glances. They had been terrified by the capabilities of what the humans considered a minor vessel. The thought of encountering a ship the humans actually considered powerful was beyond frightening. Captain, Zelthor continued, I recommend we terminate the scan immediately and withdraw from this area. We've learned enough to know that further contact with this species would be extremely dangerous. Kethfer nodded slowly. Agreed. Complete the scan and prepare to withdraw. I need to report our findings to the High Command immediately. As the Void Whisper prepared to end its analysis of the human vessel, the crew realized they had encountered something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They had found a species that had evolved to be the perfect predator, and they had done so by choice. Navigator Quindel made a discovery that sent waves of terror through the bridge of the Void Whisper. While analyzing the human star charts and navigation data, he found something that made his worst fears seem small in comparison. Captain, he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. You need to see this immediately. Kethfer approached the navigation station, noting the pale color of his officer's scales. What have you found? Sir, I've been analyzing their star charts and fleet deployment records. This ship, the one we've been scanning, it's not alone. Quindel brought up a holographic display showing human space. They have an entire fleet operating in this sector. The display showed dozens of red markers scattered across multiple star systems. Each marker represented a human vessel, and they were positioned in a clear pattern that spoke of military organization and strategic planning. How many ships? Kethfer asked, though he dreaded the answer. At least 40 vessels in this sector alone, sir. And according to their navigation logs, this is just one of many fleets. They have hundreds of ships spread across dozens of star systems. Zelthor looked up from his console with fresh horror on his face. Captain, I've cross-referenced their ship classifications. Most of these vessels are larger and more heavily armed than the one we're scanning. The science officer highlighted several markers on the display. These symbols indicate Dreadnought-class vessels, each one capable of destroying entire space stations. These others are carrier ships that launch smaller attack craft, and these are their supply vessels, designed to keep their fleets operational for extended campaigns. They're not just explorers, Morkath realized. They're conducting a systematic expansion into this region of space. Quindel nodded grimly. Their navigation records show detailed surveys of every habitable world within 50 light-years. They've cataloged resources, analyzed defensive positions, and mapped strategic choke points throughout the sector. Kethfer studied the human fleet. Positions with growing alarm. The deployment pattern was sophisticated, showing clear understanding of military strategy on a galactic scale. The humans had positioned their forces to control key trade routes and defend multiple approaches to their territory. Are they planning an invasion? He asked. I don't think so, sir, Zelthar replied after analyzing more data. Based on their operational plans, they appear to be conducting what they call colonization operations. They're looking for new worlds to settle. That doesn't sound threatening. Sir, you don't understand what human colonization involves. The science officer brought up historical records of human colonial expansion. When humans colonize a world, they don't just establish settlements. They terraform entire planets to suit their needs, often destroying existing ecosystems in the process. The display showed before and after images of human colonial worlds. Pristine alien landscapes transformed into human-style environments, with native species either relocated or eliminated entirely. They change entire worlds to match their preferences, Zelthor continued. And if they encounter resistance from native species, they have detailed protocols for dealing with opposition. What kind of protocols? Military ones, sir? They've developed strategies for fighting indigenous populations, neutralizing local governments, and establishing human control over conquered territories. They call it pacification. Aboard the Defiant Communications Officer Chen noticed a significant change in the alien scanning patterns. Captain, they've shifted focus from our military systems to our navigation and fleet deployment data. Captain Morrison frowned. They're looking at our operational plans? Yes, sir. They're accessing star charts, fleet positions, and colonial survey data. They're learning about our presence in this entire sector. Chief Engineer Parker looked up from her console with concern. Sir, they're seeing classified information about our expansion operations. They'll know about every human settlement and military installation within 50 light years. Lieutenant Commander Hayes studied his tactical display. Captain, if they share this information with their government, they'll have a complete picture of human military strength in this region. Dr. Collins continued monitoring the alien crew's stress levels.
How, sir?
Their psychological distress is reaching critical levels. I'm reading indicators that suggest several crew members are experiencing complete mental breakdown. Morrison realized that the aliens were learning not just about his ship, but about humanity's entire presence in this part of the galaxy. The implications were serious. If these aliens viewed humans as a threat, they now had enough information to plan effective countermeasures. Atlas, what's your assessment of the situation? Captain, the aliens appear to be conducting a comprehensive intelligence gathering operation. They have acquired detailed information about human military capabilities, strategic deployments, and expansion plans. This level of intelligence could be used to organize effective opposition to human activities in this sector. Back on the Void Whisper, Quindell made another disturbing discovery. Captain, I've analyzed their colonial survey reports. They've identified 17 worlds in this sector as suitable for human habitation. What's the problem with that? 3 of those worlds are already inhabited by non-human species. The humans have classified them as primitive civilizations that pose no significant threat to colonial operations. The navigator brought up detailed reports on these inhabited worlds. They've studied the native populations, analyzed their technology, levels, and developed plans for establishing human settlements, despite the existing inhabitants. Zelthar accessed the human protocols for dealing with native populations. They have something called first contact procedures, but they're designed to establish human dominance rather than peaceful coexistence. Show me. The protocols begin with attempts at communication and trade, but if the native species proves uncooperative, they escalate to intimidation, then to limited military action, and finally to full conquest if necessary. Kethfer stared. At the data in horror, they plan to conquer inhabited worlds? Only if the natives resist human colonization, sir? But their definition of resistance is very broad. Any attempt by natives to limit human access to resources or territory is considered hostile action. Morcath found examples of human colonial conflicts in their historical database. Captain, they've done this before, multiple times. Conquered dozens of inhabited worlds and either enslaved or eliminated the native populations. The communications officer displayed records of human interactions with less advanced species. They have a concept called manifest destiny, the belief that humans have a natural right to expand across the galaxy and claim any worlds they can effectively colonize. Quindell highlighted the most disturbing aspect of human expansion. Sir, they don't see other species as equals. They classify civilizations based on technological advancement, and they believe that more advanced species have the right to displace less advanced ones. They would see us as competitors, Zelthar realized. Our technology is more advanced than theirs, which means they would view us as a threat to their expansion plans. The science officer accessed human military contingency plans and found exactly what he feared. Captain, they have detailed battle plans for fighting technologically superior enemies. They've developed strategies specifically designed to overcome advantages in enemy technology. What kind of strategies? Asymmetric warfare, sir? They use tactics that neutralize technological advantages through superior numbers, surprise attacks, and exploitation of enemy weaknesses. They've studied ways to defeat superior forces by using unconventional methods. Kethfer felt the last of his composure crumble. The humans weren't just dangerous because of their military capabilities. They were dangerous because they had spent their entire history learning how to fight enemies stronger than themselves. They're expansion-minded, technologically aggressive, and strategically sophisticated, he said quietly. And now they know we're here. Zelthar checked the scan progress. Sir, we've extracted 90% of their database. Should we complete the scan? No. Terminate it now and prepare for immediate withdrawal. We need to report our findings to the High Command before these humans realize what we've learned. Quindel said hesitantly. There's one more thing. According to their navigation logs, they've already detected our scanning operation. They know we're here, and they know we've been studying them. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They had been discovered by a species of professional warriors who now knew that someone was gathering intelligence about their military capabilities. How long before their reinforcements arrive? Kethver asked. Based on their fleet positions and response protocols, approximately 6 hours, sir. The captain realized they had walked into a trap of their own making. In their attempt to understand the humans, they had revealed themselves to the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The Zephyrian Empire faced the most critical decision in its history. Captain Kethver stood before the Emergency Council transmission, his scaled face grim as he delivered his report to the High Command. The holographic figures of the empires. Leaders listened in stunned silence as he described what they had discovered. Honorable counselors, I recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7, Kethver said, his voice steady, despite the fear in his hearts. We must avoid all contact with human space and establish a quarantine zone around their territory. High Counselor Vethrin leaned forward in the transmission. Captain, are you certain of these findings? You're asking us to treat an entire species as a galactic threat? Sir, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The humans are not just another warrior species. They have evolved into something far more dangerous. Zelthor stepped forward to support his captain's assessment. Counselors, the data is conclusive. These beings have turned warfare into their primary cultural focus. Every aspect of their civilization serves their military machine. But surely they can be reasoned with, suggested Counselor Morden. Perhaps diplomatic contact could prevent conflict. Kethver shook his head firmly. Sir, their own records showed that they view diplomacy as simply another form of warfare. They negotiate from positions of strength and use treaties as tools to gain tactical advantages. Even their peaceful interactions are calculated to serve their military objectives. Captain brought up the most damning evidence from their scan. They have contingency plans for fighting every known type of enemy, including species they've never encountered. They've developed strategies for fighting beings like us, technologically superior. Civilizations that might threaten their expansion. High Counselor Vethrin studied the data with growing alarm. What do you recommend, Captain? Complete avoidance, sir. We should reroute all shipping lanes to avoid human space, classify their territory as a hazard zone, and ensure that no Zephyrian vessel ever enters their sphere of influence again. As the council debated, Zelthor made one final discovery that changed everything. Captain, I've detected something in their long-range sensor logs. They've been tracking our ships since we entered this system. What do you mean, sir? They knew we were here before we began scanning them. They've been monitoring our approach for the past 3 hours. This entire encounter was orchestrated by them. The implications hit Kethver like a physical blow. They wanted us to scan them. It appears so, sir. They positioned their ship in our patrol route, powered down their stealth systems at exactly the right moment, and made themselves appear vulnerable. They wanted us to discover their capabilities. Go board the Defiant. Captain Morrison watched the alien vessel begin its withdrawal procedures. The scan had ended abruptly 20 minutes ago, and now the aliens were preparing to leave. They're running, observed Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Their propulsion systems are charging for a jump to hyperspace. Communications Officer Chen looked up from her station. Sir, I'm detecting transmissions from their ship to somewhere outside this system. They're sending large data packets, probably everything they learned about us. Dr. Collins monitored the alien crew's final moments in the system. Captain, their stress levels have stabilized, but at extremely high readings. They're not just leaving, they're fleeing in terror. Captain Morrison considered the situation carefully. The aliens had learned about human military capabilities, but they had also revealed their own technological superiority. The encounter could go either way. Atlas. Analysis of their behavior patterns. Captain, based on their actions and communication patterns, I believe they will recommend that their civilization avoid all contact with humanity. They appear to view us as an existential threat. Chief Engineer Parker looked up from her console. Sir, should we pursue them? We could learn a lot about their technology if we force them to engage. Morrison shook his head.
I know.
Let them go. They've learned what they needed to learn, and so have we. Did we learn, sir? That there are species out there with technology far superior to ours, but they're not warriors. They're scientists and explorers who've never faced anything like us before. The captain studied the retreating alien ship through the main view screen. They're going to go back to their people and tell them about the humans, about what we're capable of, and what we represent. Back on the Void Whisper, the crew made their final preparations for departure. Kethver had received authorization from the High Command to implement immediate withdrawal protocols. All stations, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace, he ordered. Maximum distance from human territory. Zelthor completed his final analysis of the human vessel. Captain, I've confirmed the most disturbing aspect of our encounter. This ship, this crew, this entire situation, it's all routine for them. They conduct patrols like this regularly throughout their territory. You mean there are hundreds of ships like this one? Thousands, sir? And this is just their patrol fleet. According to their databases, they have entire battle groups designed for large-scale military operations. We've encountered the smallest, weakest part of their military machine. Navigator Quindell completed the jump calculations. Sir, I've plotted a course that will take us far from human space. I recommend we establish a permanent navigation restriction for this entire sector. Agreed. Signal the High Command that we're returning with critical intelligence about a species-level threat. As the Void Whisper prepared to jump, Kethford took one final look at the human battleship. Zelthar, in your scientific opinion, what would happen if our species ever came into direct conflict with theirs? The science officer considered the question carefully. Sir, based on everything we've learned, we would lose. Not because they're more advanced, because they've spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to win against superior enemies. They're apex predators, Morcath added quietly, and we just walked into their territory. The Void Whisper jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it the most important intelligence the Zephyrian Empire had ever gathered. They had discovered a species that could destroy them, not through superior technology, but through superior understanding of warfare itself. Captain Morrison watched the alien ship disappear from his sensors. Communications, Signal Fleet Command. Inform them we've made first contact with an advanced alien species. What should I tell them about the encounter, sir? Morrison considered his words carefully. Tell them the aliens conducted a detailed scan of our vessel and capabilities, then immediately fled the system. Tell them we may have just announced humanity's presence to the galaxy. Dr. Collins looked up from her medical station. Sir Do? You think they'll be back? Morrison replied with certainty. They're going to tell their people to stay as far away from us as possible. We just became the thing that goes bump in the night for an entire alien civilization. Lieutenant Commander Hayes studied the tactical display where the alien ship had been. Is that good or bad for humanity, sir?
Oh.
Morrison smiled grimly. Hayes, sometimes the best victory is the one where you never have to fire a shot. They learned what we're capable of, and they decided they wanted no part of it. The Defiant resumed its patrol route, carrying with it the knowledge that humanity had just passed its first test as a galactic power. They had encountered a superior alien civilization and, without firing a single weapon, had convinced them that humans were too dangerous to fight. In the depths of space, two civilizations had met and taken each other's measure. One had seen a galaxy full of potential threats to be overcome. The other had seen a nightmare that must be avoided at all costs. The encounter ended not with violence, but with understanding. The aliens understood that humans were killers, and the humans understood that sometimes being feared was better than being loved.